Chapter 1. A Reunion. Under a thin wash of moonlight, a small, tree-dense island rose from the vast ocean. On the beach sat a gaunt young man, his eyes deeply hollowed, a typical picture of starvation. His clothes were in tatters, but it was still faintly apparent that he was about 15. He looked down at a creature beside him, about knee-high, its body covered in jet-black feathers, without a hint of any other color. If not for the bright moon, it would have been almost invisible. His hand trembled as he reached out. For a moment he hesitated, then, as if making a decision, he laid his palm on the bird. When his fingers finally felt the real warmth under the feathers, his complicated expression softened. He pulled his gaze away and let out a small breath. "I didn't expect to come back," Aoki murmured, a statement that needed no more explanation. Memories flashed through his mind. In his previous life, he had been a powerful trainer, the sort of talent people compared to a quasi-elite four member. He remembered barely surviving the Rocket Gang's trials after being captured. Using the skills and special abilities he had then, he had clawed his way up within the Rocket Gang and earned a certain notoriety in the underground. But during a League encirclement, he had been ambushed by a rival within the gang. His confidence, bloated after reaching quasi-elite four level, made him believe he could survive the raid. He had not expected the League to send 2 Elite 4 level trainers specifically to deal with him. Although they hadn't used their signature Pokémon, they were still well beyond his ability to resist. With no escape, he had killed 2 of their second-tier Pokémon in desperation, enraging the 2 Elite 4 members, who then buried him alive. When he opened his eyes, he was in the present scene. Aoki stretched with effort. All the scars from previous injuries and training were gone. His hands, yellowed by malnutrition, revealed the outlines of veins and bones. He clenched his fists until his nails bit into his palms without his noticing. Caw! The Murkrow made a soft sound and stared up at him, curious at the person who seemed to have changed. Hearing the cry, Aoki forced a smile. His face, unused to smiling for so long, seemed to remember the expression slowly. He stroked the bird's back again. It felt rough and undernourished, just like him. "Murkrow, it's good to have you," Aoki said, voice full of tangled emotion. In his previous life, his manner toward others had been rigid. Even when he changed later, it had been too late. Murkrow, his starter Pokémon, had stayed by his side from beginning to end, acting as his bodyguard and closest companion. Even in the final moments of that life, it had protected him and never given up. The other powerful partners he had grabbed, bought, or stolen had abandoned him. Only Murkrow had remained loyal, and it was the thing he regretted most. "Caw," Murkrow answered. Though it did not understand why, it clearly felt the deep bond the person before it had. Even if this was their first meeting in this life, Murkrow did not want to attack. Once Aoki released it, the bird neither fled nor struck, only watched him with curiosity. Aoki felt a stab of astonishment. In his former life, capturing that first Murkrow had taken a huge effort. Fully understanding and mastering it had cost him even more time. He had been someone who only knew Pokémon from a few anime he'd seen, who knew almost nothing beyond the vague relationship between a character named Ash and a mysterious Pikachu. He hadn't even recognized all the species, let alone their moves and training methods. In this world, people said a Pokémon's growth potential came from its innate talent, but its growth floor depended entirely on the trainer's care. The former Aoki had wasted endless hours learning every nuance of Murkrow's nature. Only after that painstaking work had he properly trained the bird. By then, however, a part of Murkrow's potential was already lost. The reason he had been able to stand out in the trials had been mostly Murkrow's own talent. Aoki had taken many detours and consumed much of Murkrow's potential himself. Over time, as he relied on Murkrow, he also slowly forgot what he owed it. "Murkrow, in this life, I will never abandon you again," he whispered, his hand trembling as he stroked it. "Murkrow," the bird cried at the exact right moment, as if answering Aoki's vow. A genuine smile finally tugged at his lips. His body relearned the movement, but his heart tightened immediately. Judging by his surroundings, he must have been captured and brought to this deserted island, given his first Pokémon by force. His progress through the trial would depend entirely on Murkrow. He recalled the cruelty of those trials. Among the recruits the Rocket Gang sent here, Most got Zubat, Coughing, or Arbok. As far as he knew, Murkrow was relatively rare. After being assigned a Pokémon, the first task for each recruit was to release it from its Pokéball and then try to capture and tame it. This wasn't like the cartoons. These were real, untamed creatures. Wild Pokémon often attacked outright, sometimes fatally, and fled the moment they were released. Aoki remembered there being about 300 young men and women, aged 15 to 18, participating in the trials. After the first stage, taming the Pokémon, only around 150 to 160 remained. Nearly half were eliminated in that first round, and elimination meant death. By the end of the entire trial, only 50 people would survive. Those 50 would be absorbed into various Rocket Gang teams and branches, becoming expendable agents. Only the top 10 could choose which branch to join. The top 3 could report for squad leader positions. The first place winner would receive a precious starter Pokémon. Starter Pokémon were extremely rare here. Except for legitimate league members who paid their fees on time, starters almost never showed up in the wild. The Rocket Gang's starter rewards were also of exceptional talent. He vaguely remembered that in his previous life, the first place winner had chosen a Bulbasaur, and with that talented Bulbasaur, the winner had risen to become a regional leader in the Rocket Gang, reaching the peak of quasi-Elite Four strength, nearly an Elite Four member. The runner-up had been close behind, and by the later stages, Aoki himself had even served under that first-place trainer, so he had watched the whole rise intimately. He knew how far behind he had been. Aoki brushed dust from his clothes and rose slowly to his feet. As his body stiffened, a thought struck him. If he had truly been reborn, then something else should still exist. He closed his eyes and whispered, "System, activate." Beep, chip activating. A mechanical voice sounded inside his head, emotionless and flat. 10 seconds passed. Just as Aoki was about to lose hope, the voice continued, "Indeed." Chapter 2, Chip Activation. As expected, this chip came with me when I first arrived in this world. Even Aomuki, normally unnervingly calm, felt a thrill run through him. In his previous life, the main reason he had managed to reach the rank of quasi-elite trainer was because of this chip. Back then, he had activated it by accident, and even with its help, had been left far behind by everyone else. He had had to fight tooth and nail just to survive. Chip, scan. He forced his excitement down and focused on the Murkrow perched beside him. Almost instantly, beep! A three-dimensional holographic display sprang up in front of his eyes. Only he could see it. Pokémon, Murkrow, green. Gender, male. Level 8, type dark flying. Ability, Prankster, lets the user act first with status moves. Held item, none egg moves. Punishment, power 60 plus 20 times stat boost stages. Dark, physical status. Sucker Punch, power 60 dark physical, priority when the target attacks. Roost, equals 0 flying, status, lands to restore half HP. Basic moves, Peck, power 40 flying physical. Astonish, power 30 ghost physical, may cause 30% flinch. Pursuit, power 40 dark physical, 2's damage if the target switches out. Tutor moves, Snatch, power equals 0 dark status, steals healing or stat changes. Tailwind, power equal flying, status, raises all allies' speed for 4 turns. TMHM, none. A flood of specific data described Murkrow's moves, abilities, and potential in detail. Aomuki's eyes gleamed. When he'd first opened the chip in his old life, it had been blank. He'd had to obtain every scrap of information himself, digging through the Rocket Team's databases within his authority, sneaking into forbidden archives, and once or twice risking everything to hack parts of the Alliance. He'd learned that knowledge was the true currency for a civilian trainer. With it, he could cultivate Pokémon precisely and bring out their potential. Seeing this kind of detailed readout already present filled him with a mix of relief and excitement. The green label next to Murkrow's name indicated its aptitude. The talent ranking was a spectrum: red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, with green sitting in the middle. Don't mistake middle for weak. Wild Pokémon were mostly red and orange, and yellow, when it appeared, was snatched up by trainers for its rarity. Green aptitude was already rare. Aomuki estimated that among the Pokémon distributed by the Rocket Team on this island, fewer than 10 would have green aptitude. The team had clearly set a few prospects aside for new recruits. In his former life, Aomuki had relied on his green aptitude Murkrow to scrape by and had finished just 34th in the trial. That showed how much of his survival had been Murkrow's doing and how little reflected his own skill. He drew a slow breath and calmed himself. This time, he swore he wouldn't be weak. Weakness was a sin. On this trial island, the rule of survival was simple: the law of the jungle. To become strong, you had to strengthen your Pokémon first. The first step was to make up for Murkrow's early deficits. A normal Murkrow stood around half a meter tall. His was barely 40 centimeters. He needed to catch up physically before his talent could be fully realized. "Let's go, Murkrow. We'll find you something to eat." Aomuki patted his shoulder to signal the bird onto it. Murkrow hesitated. Aomuki's gaunt frame, starved of nutrition, didn't look like a 15-year-old boy at all, and the bird worried it might crush him. After a moment, it hopped up. Aomuki felt his shoulder dip and leave deeper prints in the sand as he walked toward the forest. As someone who had clawed his way up through the rocket team, Aomuki knew wilderness survival. Which berries were edible, which were poisonous, which restored stamina quickly, and which could cure abnormal conditions. He gave a few ripe orange berries to Murkrow and bit into a slightly unripe one himself. Sour juice ran down his chin. He chewed, swallowed, and accepted the sting. In the wild, ripe fruit was scarce because of the abundance of wild Pokémon, so he had to make do with less ripe fruit. It worked, just not as well. "Murkrow," he said, apologetic, "eat. I know you prefer meat, but this is all we've got right now." Murkrow nuzzled his cheek with its beak, a soft, reassuring caw. Aomuki smiled, and for a moment let his mind overlap the Murkrow on his shoulder with the image of the one who had protected him to the death in his previous life. A warm, slow bond formed in his chest, something he had given up before and was determined to grasp now. They walked along a path, their footsteps shallow and deep in the sand, until Aomuki stopped by a thicket. He knew these bushes often sheltered small animals, and sometimes Pokémon. In this world, there were creatures people ate, and carnivorous Pokémon sometimes preyed on them. Still, Pokémon were generally not treated as food by people. Whoosh! A gray wild rabbit streaked out of the brush. "Looks like tonight's dinner," Aomuki said, a small smile curving his lips. "Murkrow, peck!" At the scent of food and the command, Murkrow didn't hesitate. It darted forward and struck the rabbit with a rapid, fierce peck. The wild animal couldn't withstand a Pokémon's attack and fell dead where it stood. Murkrow was already celebrating the kill when a blur of purple darted across the ground, and the rabbit vanished. Chapter 3. The First Time. By the time Aoki and Murkrow reacted, a small, pale purple Pokémon stood between them and the wild rabbit. It clawed and bared its teeth as if staking a claim on the prey. To think the rabbit had been chased out of the bushes only to have its kill taken by this newcomer. Luckily, Murkrow had been fast enough to snatch it. Pokémon, Rattata Red. Gender male, level 10, type normal, ability, runaway, held item, neg moves none. Base moves, tackle, tail whip, quick attack, focus energy, bite tutor moves, none. The Pokémon that had appeared was a Rattata. The move that stole the rabbit was quick attack. "Caw!" Murkrow cried, offended and threatened by having its meal taken. Its pale yellow beak flashed with cold light. If Aoki hadn't intervened, Murkrow might have lunged at the Rattata on instinct. A red-grade Rattata was one of the island's most common Pokémon. Though it was 2 levels higher than Murkrow, level alone didn't tell the whole story. "Since you stepped out on your own, you'll be Murkrow's first opponent," Aoki said without expression. When the wild rabbit had darted into view, he'd already had a suspicion. No sensible rabbit would have fled so recklessly. "Murkrow, Tailwind!" Aoki ordered. A light breeze stirred around Murkrow, and it felt lighter in the air. Tailwind increases the speed of allies. Reality here wasn't a turn-based game. The faster you were, the more of the fight you controlled. Murkrow's respectable base speed of 91, boosted by Tailwind, put it well ahead of the Rattata. "Peck!" Aoki commanded coldly. The first rule of this jungle: the strong prey on the weak. The strong didn't take pity. A shadow streaked through the trees, and before the Rattata could react, Murkrow's sharp beak struck. "Squeak!" the Rattata cried out in pain, finally realizing that this small, coal-black bird was not to be trifled with. It tried to turn and run. "Murkrow, astonish!" Aoki called. A piercing, terrifying sound issued from Murkrow. The Rattata, already hurt and shaken, froze. Timid by nature, it didn't know what to do. Astonish attacks by startling the target with a frightening sound and can cause flinching. Its effect was often stronger in practiced chains of moves than the raw percentages suggested. This Rattata would learn that the hard way. Press the advantage. Peck, repeatedly, Aoki said, slipping fully into battle mode. No matter how weak an enemy looked, it couldn't be underestimated. The second rule of the jungle: never show mercy just because an opponent seems weak. You never know what they're hiding. After another assault, the Rattata could no longer fight. Murkrow prepared to finish it, but then Aoki's voice cut through again, colder than before. Murkrow hesitated, glancing between Aoki and the fallen Rattata. A flicker of reluctance crossed its eyes, and then it was gone. Murkrow struck until the Rattata was dead. A trace of softness came and left quickly in Aoki's expression. On this savage trial island, sentiment was a liability. Even the smallest enemy had to be respected. Murkrow's hesitation was understandable. It was its first kill. Aoki understood. Survival here required hard lessons. To secure a place in Team Rocket, you fought with hunger and without mercy. Blood was the most terrifying color, a truth Aoki had learned over years in his previous life. Now he had to teach it to his Pokémon. Murkrow picked up the rabbit and flapped twice, landing on Aoki's shoulder. They moved deeper into the forest together, tacit understanding forming between man and bird. Sizzle, sizzle. Golden drips from the roasting rabbit hit the fire and hissed. With no seasonings, the fat and meat still released a mouth-watering scent. Murkrow hopped by the fire, eyes fixed on the roast, unable to hide its eagerness. Aoki smiled slightly. "It'll be ready soon, don't rush." Soon the rabbit was cooked through. Aoki tore off a hind leg and left the rest for Murkrow. The wild rabbits on the island were plump. A single hind leg was plenty for his depleted body. He felt warmth spreading through him as he ate. After meat, his strength returned bit by bit. Watching Murkrow devour its portion in a few greedy bites, Aoki allowed himself a long breath. Both of them needed time to recover. To speed the process would require herbs and berries, or something quicker. Chip, search for energy cubes that quickly restore depleted bodies and recuperate Pokémon talent, Aoki ordered silently. Energy cubes, one of the breeder's tools. As the chip's owner, he intended to make full use of it. In his previous life, he'd been an excellent Pokémon breeder, even if never officially recognized by the Alliance. Making energy cubes was his specialty. Manufacturing energy cubes required controlling materials to within 1,000th of a gram and timing to within 1,000th of a millisecond. Most growers relied on experience, so cube quality varied. For Aoki, it was effortless. Handing control to the chip produced near-identical results every time, like duplication. The recipes stored in the chip were one of his greatest assets. With enough materials, he could quickly restore Pokémon and cultivate talent without waste. The moment he gave the command, the chip displayed a complete list of required materials and the effects each cube would have. Chapter 4. Energy Cubes. Aoki finally found a recipe that fit, a mid-grade energy cube called the Yellow Fruit Energy Cube. Its purpose was straightforward: to replenish missing elements in a Pokémon's body, quickly adjust its physiology, and restore as much of its original talent as possible. The ingredients were nothing rare, just common berries and herbs that grew on the resource-rich trial island, and the process required no complex machinery. It was perfect for his and Murkrow's current situation. He fashioned a crude set of crafting tools out of wood. They were simple and, truth be told, ugly. Next is to gather the materials, he told himself. Training will have to wait until Murkrow's body recovers. He didn't want to waste Murkrow's potential by pushing it yet while it was depleted. Still, Aoki believed that a short pause wouldn't set them back long. 3 days passed as they scoured the forest edge for the needed berries and herbs. It took a little longer than he'd hoped, but not disastrously so. When he finally held the first yellow fruit energy cube, a cool sensation radiated through his palm. Against the sunlight, he could see faint, pulp-like streaks suspended inside. The cube's pale yellow surface was smooth, and a fresh, mild fragrance lingered in the air. Making the cubes went smoothly. The recipe was something he'd stumbled across in his previous life, but had never made before. Now, he only hoped it would work. He flipped the finished cube up with a flick of his finger. Murkrow, who had been watching intently from Aoki's shoulder, shot out like a flash and snatched it in its beak. The smell and the act of seeing the cube made it impossible for the bird to restrain itself. Aoki smiled as Murkrow waited for his nod before swallowing it. Caw! Murkrow's eyes closed in contentment. The taste was new and delicious to it. Even the two green indicators on Aoki's chip deepened slightly after the cube was eaten, a clear sign something was changing. Looks like you like it, Aoki said. Yellow fruit medium energy cubes. Eat up to 10 a day. After that, the effect disappears. If you take them for 7 full days, the recipe says they can restore a Pokemon's depleted body. He had made nearly 100 cubes. He set aside 9 and wrapped the rest in a cloth bag, tying it to his waist. Then he began tossing the cubes one by one. Murkrow caught each with lightning reflexes and swallowed them. The effects wouldn't be instant, but the chip showed small but definite improvement. To get the most out of them, we'll start training now, Aoki told Murkrow as he tossed the last cube. Ready to get stronger? Caw, came the enthusiastic reply. Aoki already knew Murkrow's strengths and weaknesses. Its greatest asset was raw speed. If he didn't exploit that base stat, it would be a waste. What made Murkrow even more dangerous was its hidden ability, Prankster, which gives priority to status moves. In the right hands, it was a first strike advantage. Murkrow, use Tailwind, he said. A faint breeze formed around Murkrow. Tailwind is a status move that boosts speed for allies. The energy from the cube flowed through Murkrow, warm and steady, turning into a current of vigor in its limbs and bones. When Tailwind faded after a minute, Aoki was already instructing further. Keep Tailwind only around you and try to extend its duration, he ordered. If Tailwind affected only Murkrow rather than a group, it would consume less energy and could be held longer, potentially allowing a permanent increase in its effective speed. Murkrow didn't understand the reasoning, but it concentrated on trapping the airflow around itself and stretching the effect. After a minute, the breeze finally died. Murkrow let out a breathy cry as if it had used all its strength. Remember this state. Our goal is to have Tailwind around you all the time. Again. Once training began, Aoki became an unyielding instructor. With his chip, he could monitor Murkrow's limits precisely. No overtraining to damage it, no undertraining that would produce no result. They repeated the cycle over and over. Continue, Tailwind. Continue, continue. For 3 days of relentless practice, Murkrow learned to hold Tailwind longer and longer. A minute became 10. It could now maintain the Tailwind field on Aoki's shoulder without affecting him, conserving its own energy while keeping its speed advantage. Normally, Aoki would have kept training in the forest until the final trial, but Team Rocket required everyone to report to the base weekly. Miss a report, and you lost points. Lose enough points, and you were out. The rules were strict. The plaza at the base was nearly empty compared to the 300 who had started the trial. Only a few wary figures remained, their expressions guarded and hostile. Everyone who'd made it this far had learned how unforgiving failure could be. Alliances had formed, but they were fragile and self-interested. When life and death were on the line, who trusted anyone? Aoki glanced at the small cliques with a faint disdain. Grouping up was a survival tactic, but mostly it meant a few strong people gathering followers to do the dirty work. In the end, strength decided everything. Nearly everyone there had a Pokemon. Most were accompanied by Zubat. A few had Arbok or Coughing. Only a handful had rarer partners like Murkrow. Aoki counted maybe 3 in total. Against the venom of Arbok and the danger of Coughing, Zubat were easy prey. Taming a wild Pokemon at all was already impressive for the younger contestants. Over a week in the jungle, the divide between the strong and weak had only grown. Despite just 3 days of focused training and limited battles, Murkrow had reached level 10. Among the other competitors, that was nothing extraordinary, and Aoki himself didn't stand out. His face, paler at first, had regained some color after days of nutritional supplementation. He moved to the edge of the plaza, crossed his arms, leaned against a stone pillar, and closed his eyes to rest. Chapter 5. The Viper Instructor. Not long after, the noisy square fell silent. A fierce-looking, middle-aged man nearly 2 meters tall strode into the center, wearing a military cap and a uniform with a prominent red R on his left chest. 10 Team Rocket grunts followed him, each expressionless and flanked by a mighty hyena. Beside the leader stood a pitch-black Houndoom, its head crowned with 2 curved white bone horns and its tail like a demon's, a dark fire-type Pokémon. Houndoom. Aoki opened his eyes slowly as the square quieted. Seeing the man, his gaze narrowed. It's him. He glanced at the Houndoom. The data chip on his arm flickered and displayed the Pokemon's info for a moment. Pokemon Houndoom, gender male, level 28, types Dark Fire, ability Flash Fire held item, none egg moves, Fire Fang, Fire Spin, basic moves Inferno, Nasty Plot, Thunder, Fleer, Ember, Howl, Smog, Roar, Bite, Odor, Sleuth, Beat Up, Foul Play, TMHM, Hidden Power, Rock, Shadow Ball, Flamethrower. Seeing the level in that long list of moves, Aoki felt a pang of helplessness. The gap was obvious. He also knew this wasn't even the man's top-tier Pokemon, maybe not even second-tier. If the man sent out any of his higher-ranked Pokemon, they could crush everyone present. There are actually 156 of you still alive this time. Pretty good quality, the man said quietly but clearly. His voice made it sound like he was talking about cattle, not people. He scanned the crowd, and when he had everyone's attention, he spoke coldly. My name is Viper. I'm Team Rocket's chief instructor in charge of Purgatory Island. From now on, your lives are no longer your own. A hideous grin crossed his face as his presence pressed down on the assembled contestants. The Purgatory trial lasts 3 months. You must gather here once a week, miss 2 meetings, and you've failed the trial. I believe you all understand the consequences of failure. He flicked a glance at the large stone in the center of the square. This is the Trial Stone, a testing device developed with Team Rocket's latest technology. It measures the force of a Pokemon's attack. You will take turns attacking this stone, and we will rank you based on the feedback. The top 10 each week receive points, increasing as the ranks go up. What those points can be exchanged for, you'll find out. Team Rocket points, exclusive to Team Rocket, could be exchanged for almost anything in this world. They were one of the reasons Team Rocket wielded such influence. Many rare resources were controlled by powerful families. Even money couldn't buy everything. Points earned on the island could be used at any Team Rocket base once the trial ended. The maximum number who can pass is 50. The top 10 each week will receive 10,000 points. The top 3 will get a Team Rocket Forged Alliance ID card, and first place can choose any excellent starter Pokemon from Team Rocket's warehouse. He paused, letting the promise hang in the air, then added with relish. And most importantly, there is one rule of this trial. There are no rules. First ranking begins, Viper announced, sat down in a chair in the middle of the square, and signaled his grunts to start recording. The 10 grunts moved efficiently. Everyone quickly fell into line for the first test. Arbok, bite! A young voice called. A purple snake launched forward and clamped its fangs into the stone. The sound of impact echoed. Attack value 56. A grunt called out the result without emotion. Number 34, attack value 56. Temporarily first? Next. He wrote the score in his notebook. The boy who had just finished wore a smug look and stepped aside. A timid boy with a Zubat came next. Zubat tackle! The Zubat flapped and struck the stone weakly. Attack value 19. The first boy snorted in disdain. Those still waiting glanced at the Zubat trainer with contempt. The recording grunt stayed expressionless. To him, these kids who'd only just met Pokemon were pitiable and not worth more than a flicker of interest. Number 13, attack value 19, temporarily second. Next. Number 24, attack value 25, temporarily second. Next. Number 98, attack value 45. Number 77, attack value. One after another, the scores were read. Those with higher scores looked down on the lower ones, while those lower chewed their teeth at anyone above them. The atmosphere reminded Aoki of the Team Rocket goo-raising trial from his past life. Only when the participants began to fight would the strongest emerge. Attack value, 98. A burst of exclamation came from the front. A slender young man with fair skin and clean clothes, who looked as if he shouldn't even be here, had earned the highest score so far. His Arbok stood proudly beside him, eyes full of contempt for the rest. It's him, Aoki murmured. If his memory was right, this was the guy who had once taken first place in this trial, won an excellent Bulbasaur, and thereafter rose rapidly in status, someone Aoki could never quite catch up to after activating his chip. Number 99, Kuga. No one beat Kuga's 98. As most of the tests concluded, Aoki's number, 234, was called. Another one with a special Pokemon. Whispers ran through the crowd when they saw the Murkrow perched on his shoulder. Team Rocket tended to distribute Zubats, Arbok, and Coughing. Any odd Pokemon stood out. That didn't automatically make it stronger, but people treated the owner like an oddity. Chutch, it's just a Murkrow, someone scoffed. The last Murkrow didn't score high. Look how scrawny that trainer is and how small the Murkrow is. Bet his score won't be anything special. Aoki ignored them. He took a steady breath and said calmly, "Tailwind, Peck." The mockers fell silent, suddenly embarrassed by their loudness. Murkrow rose, a faint white current swirling around it as Tailwind took effect. Over a few days, its body had recovered to a normal Murkrow size. It circled once, gathered every last bit of speed, and dove at the stone with a powerful peck, then rolled smoothly and landed back on Aoki's shoulder. Aoki gave a small smile and walked away. Attack value 97. The number on the stone hit like a slap to those who had mocked him. 97, second only to Kuga's 98. The gap between second and third was large. Third sat at only 90. Number 234, attack value 97, temporarily ranked second. Next, the recorder called, but even he stole a look at Aoki as he rejoined the crowd. Murkrow's raw power shouldn't have produced such a reading. Aoki had used a trick. He had Murkrow gain Tailwind's inertia and then convert that speed into a downward strike using gravity, boosting the impact. It was a small trick, but the outcome was significant. After all, there were no rules. A few quick-witted challengers mulled this over. The trick was obvious once you saw it, and effective. Viper had watched the entire process closely. When Aoki finished, he lingered on him for a few extra seconds. An interesting little fellow, he thought. Chapter 6, Exchange Center. No one beat Aoki's score after that, but many had learned from his technique and improved drastically. The one who looked down on everyone the most was Gujia. He hadn't used any tricks. His score came from raw power. In his mind, everyone else was weak, even Aoki, who had scored 1 point less. Aoki had just been lucky with a few tricks. The final rankings read, first place, ID 99, attack value 98. Second place, ID 234, attack value 97. Third place, ID 67, attack value 95. Fourth place, ID 156, attack value 93. Fifth place, ID 79, attack value 90. According to Viper, the top 10 all received 100 points. There was no difference in reward between first and second. After the rankings were posted, everyone was given a belt stamped with the Team Rocket R. Each belt contained an ID card with its owner's number and stored points, and the belt itself doubled as a 1 cubic meter storage unit. Ignoring everyone who tried to stop him, Aoki mounted Murkrow and headed straight for the exchange center. As a former Team Rocket member, he knew how wide-ranging the point shop's inventory could be. There were a lot of things he wanted, but most of the truly valuable items cost far more than he had. He only had 100 points, so he skipped the unattainable luxuries, pseudo-legendary Dratini and Larvitar hatchlings for 10 million points each, and went straight to what he could afford. Flipping through the catalog, he zeroed in on the berry list. The exchange clerk looked at him like he'd lost his mind as Aoki traded in points for one of every berry. Most people wouldn't bother, but to Aoki, those berries were invaluable. They would save hours of foraging and could be used to make Pokeblocks to train Murkrow toward perfect growth. He filled the cubic meter compartment in his belt with berries. Buying each type once cost him 80 points. He then spent another 5 points on daily necessities and wilderness gear. After swiping his point card, Aoki was about to leave when someone else entered the exchange center with an Arbok, Gujia. Aoki silently activated his chip scanner as the man passed. Pokemon, Arbok, green grade. Gender, level 14. Type poison. Ability, intimidate held item none. Egg moves, pursuit, poison fang, glare. Basic moves, bind, leer, poison sting, bite, glare. Tutor moves, snatch, none. Aoki froze. A green grade Arbok. No wonder Gujia had taken first place. From the scans during the ranking test, there shouldn't have been more than 5 green grade Pokemon on the island, and none higher, though some were too far away to scan. The other green-grade Pokemon Aoki had noticed were a Zubat and an Oddish. Gujia's Arbok was the only green-grade Arbok. Arbok were notoriously wild and difficult to tame. A green-grade specimen with Intimidate was exceptional. Whoever had raised it was no ordinary trainer. "Hey, you're the second place, right?" Gujia called, turning his head. Aoki kept walking without answering. Gujia's face twisted as Aoki ignored him. Pride prickled him. He wasn't seasoned in guile yet, having just arrived on Trial Island, so he lashed out. "Arbok, go! Poison sting!" Arbok opened its fanged mouth and spat several small, purple-glowing needles toward Aoki's back. Aoki had anticipated the move even without turning. "You asked for it. Murkrow, intensify Tailwind. Knock away that poison sting." Murkrow, already trained in Tailwind, amplified the gust into something almost like a focused wind attack. Two small whirlwinds formed and blew the poison sting needles aside. Aoki turned, a dangerous glint in his eyes, waiting for Gujia's next move. He wasn't entirely sure he could win in a straight fight, but he wasn't backing down. Gujia only grinned. "Not bad, better than I expected." Then he ignored Aoki and walked straight to the exchange counter. Aoki frowned, suppressing his urge to act, signaled Murkrow down, and left the exchange center. He and Murkrow headed into the forest without looking back. In the large central building of the base, Viper sat behind his desk in the chief instructor's office. Opposite him sat a figure wrapped entirely in a black robe. Between them, 2 cups of tea sent up thin tendrils of steam that hovered briefly before fading. Viper broke the silence with a teasing tone. "Back to see me again? What's the matter this time?" A pair of weathered eyes peered from beneath the robe. The figure shifted, and a hoarse voice answered, age impossible to guess from the sound alone. "The mission failed. I need a few people to replenish my team." Viper smiled and sipped his tea leisurely. "The mission failed? I didn't expect even you, someone with a name, to fail. Now you come asking me for people. Is there no one in Team Rocket you can rely on?" The black-robed voice remained calm as it spoke again. "I walked into an alliance trap. 2 Elite 4-level trainers showed up. I almost didn't get away." Viper's amusement vanished. He sat up sharply. "Overt or covert? How did you escape?" Questions poured out. Elite 4 trainers were powerhouses, and the Alliance sending 2 at once could mean something big. The candlelight in the room flickered, throwing moving shadows on the wall. The black-robed figure raised a hand. Viper's eyes narrowed at the sight of a withered left hand revealed from under the sleeve, wrinkled, shrunken, and missing 3 fingers. Only the thumb and index finger remained. "Poison Elite 4? Viper asked, more to confirm than to inquire. Such damage pointed to a high-level poison attack. To maim someone of Elite 4 caliber, it would have to be an exceptional opponent. The robed figure inclined its head. The hoarse voice took on a colder edge. A high-level poison-type Elite 4 and a mid-level psychic type. Neither were acting as part of the Alliance's overt strength. "If I hadn't acted quickly and cut off 3 fingers, my whole hand would have been gone," the figure said, controlling a visible agitation in its chest. "I managed to hold them off with 3 Pokemon long enough to escape, but the mission failed." Chapter 7. Leaving the base, Poisonous Snake nodded gravely. The Alliance had sent 2 Elite 4-level operatives, one of them a rare high-level Elite 4. That suggested they knew something about the mission, otherwise they wouldn't deploy such strong forces. His brow tightened. Even with limited information, he could tell the situation was delicate. "And the leader?" he asked. "The leader already knows," the black-robed man replied coolly, withdrawing his left hand. "Who leaked it doesn't matter. For now, I just need a few people for some small tasks. Our losses were heavy this time. I need time to recover." Poisonous Snake relaxed a little. "A few people would be no problem. Do you want them after the trial ends or now?" he asked, masking his amusement. These kids were hardly worth much, barely the strength of a grunt. "After the trial. Pick a few then. For now, arrange me a room so I can adjust," the man said without further explanation. He deliberately avoided choosing from the existing ranks. First, because he couldn't tell who among Team Rocket was loyal and who might be Alliance spies. Second, because an inexperienced recruit was easier to shape into exactly what he wanted. After Poisonous Snake had his subordinates lead the black-robed man away, he stared at the candle on the table, clasped his hands, and fell into thought. Meanwhile, Aoki and Murkrow pushed deeper into the forest. They didn't plan to linger at the edge. The Pokémon there were low-level and unsuitable for Murkrow's training. Aoki wanted a quiet spot to camp and make energy blocks from oranberries without interruption. He packed the oranberry energy blocks into the storage slot on his Team Rocket belt and wrapped extra cloth strips around his head to protect his face from thorns and branches. Murkrow perched on his shoulder, keeping Tailwind up and using the airflow to gently part branches and brush, making the path easier. When larger limbs blocked the way, the bird flapped and released a rough, still awkward gust, both to clear the path and to train its flying energy. Murkrow, when you use flying energy, be mindful of how much you use, Aoki coached as they walked. Stamina is your weakness. Don't waste it when you can conserve it. And remember, you're a dark flying type. Once we find a place, we'll start targeted training for your dark moves. Murkrow cawed emphatically in agreement. It was hungry to get stronger. Its battling spirit pulsed as strongly as its talent. Two small whirlwinds blew from between them as it flapped, eager and alert. Aoki smiled. No matter how talented a Pokémon might be, without the will to fight and improve, that talent was wasted. Murkrow's drive and its synergy with Aoki promised real growth. Their thoughts were interrupted when a robust wild Fearow dropped down from a tree, eyes savage, beak and talons gleaming. Pokémon on this island showed no particular goodwill toward humans. Many treated a lone, slender trainer like Aoki as prey. Fearow were notoriously bad-tempered. The ambush was nothing Aoki hadn't seen before. He shifted a fraction of an inch and slipped cleanly out of the attack's path. In a world where strong Pokémon could easily inflict fatal wounds, and where some people used Pokémon to attack humans, quick reflexes were vital. Aoki had reached his position within Team Rocket and become an expert with near Elite Four power by surviving countless such encounters. The Fearow's strike was routine to him. Murkrow, while Tailwind's up, use Sucker Punch, he ordered. Murkrow launched itself angrily into the air. It had been humiliated. If Aoki had been hit, he could have been badly hurt. The bird's pride flared. A black flash of energy, Sucker Punch, bolstered by Tailwind, hit the Fearow squarely. The wild bird screeched and was sent tumbling. Aoki took the moment to scan the Fearow's data. Pokemon Fearow Orange, gender, male level 12, type normal flying, ability keen eye held item none, egg moves none, base moves peck, growl, leer, pursuit, fury, attack TM, HM moves none. An orange potential Fearow respectable for a wild specimen, Aoki noted. Murkrow, keep going. Peck, he said calmly. Murkrow was already on it. The stunned Fearow barely had time to react before the swift Murkrow closed in with repeated pecks. Struck again and again, the aggressive Fearow paid the price for its ill-timed ambush. Aoki ignored the fallen bird and moved on. Fearow tended to travel in flocks. He didn't want to provoke a group right then. He also didn't want to waste energy on unnecessary fights. Stronger Pokémon would likely appear deeper in, and his priority was finding the right campsite. Using his experience living in forests, Aoki avoided stronger Pokémon and rid animal trails to judge where to go. After dispatching a few more aggressive creatures and pushing forward for about 3 hours, he and Murkrow arrived at a spot that fit his needs, a small lake ringed by dense trees. On the lake's west side, a low hill bore a cave clearly dug out by Pokémon. This is it, Aoki said. Chapter 8, Golbat Cave. The setting sun hung low, its last light scattering across the lake. A breeze ruffled the surface, sending small ripples outward. Aoki and Murkrow approached the mouth of the cave slowly. Unnoticed at first, a foul smell drifted from inside. Aoki frowned. Murkrow instinctively covered its beak with a wing, as if the stench itself was unpleasant. The nearer they came, the lighter Aoki's steps became. By the time they reached the entrance, the smell was strong, but both had grown used to it. The cave was pitch black and clearly not natural. Deep claw marks scarred the rocks around the opening. Judging by those marks, this place has been dug out for a long time, Aoki murmured. I hope there aren't any overly powerful Pokémon in there. Murkrow, perched on his shoulder, went alert. Its muscles tensed and the air around it began to stir, ready for a fight. Aoki smiled faintly and soothed it. It's fine, Murkrow. Let's just see what's inside. He picked up a pebble, weighted it in his hand, then hurled it into the darkness. The pebble struck and echoed, thud, 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 then silence. After a moment, noises answered, a rustling from deep in the cave, then the beating of many wings. Aoki relaxed slightly. As long as the Pokemon inside weren't something like an Ursaring, he trusted Murkrow could handle them. A swarm of Golbats streamed out, angry at being disturbed. Like most bats, wild Golbats slept through the day and hunted at night. Being woken like this was like a person being dragged out of a deep sleep. One Golbat was noticeably larger than the others, the obvious leader of the swarm. When it realized the disturbance was only a human and a small-looking Pokemon, it gave a few calls and herded most of the group back into the cave to resume sleeping. Aoki watched, a little surprised. There had been more than a dozen Golbat. Had they attacked in force, he would have had to retreat with Murkrow. The leader's disdain cut the pressure in half. 4 Golbat, however, opened their mouths to reveal long fangs, ready to drain blood, and with a couple of wing beats charged at Aoki and Murkrow. Aoki's chip had already scanned them the moment they appeared. Only 4 Golbat of red aptitude, max level 10, he muttered, amused. Murkrow launched into the air. The last 2 days of training and the recovery of its potential had made it relish combat. It loved becoming a gust of wind, darting between foes and playing with them. Murkrow, Tailwind, then Astonish, Aoki ordered. Wind streamed and gathered around Murkrow, making a dark shimmer against the setting sun. It opened its beak and let out a piercing shriek that bent the air. 2 of the Golbat froze, faces contorted in fright, slowed, though not fully disabled. The other 2 shook it off, bothered but moving on. Golbat usually have inner focus and resist flinching, but their hearing is keen. The harsh sound of Astonish still upset them, and since they relied on sound-based supersonic navigation, the noise interfered with their coordination. The 2 that had shrugged it off then flung back invisible sound waves, supersonic, trying to disorient Murkrow. Aoki's face stayed calm despite the interference. "Keep accelerating and take them down first," he said. The tailwind pushed Murkrow faster. Before the Golbat could react, Murkrow struck with 2 full-power pecks, the momentum from its high-speed flight driving the hits through. Both Golbat crumpled. The 2 that had been stunned by Astonish recovered their hearing and saw their fallen comrades. Fear flashed across their faces as their wings faltered, torn between attack and retreat. Aoki's lips curved. He wouldn't wait for them to decide. Punishment, finish them! Punishment, aided by Murkrow's prankster ability, hit with priority. The black light of Murkrow's move struck, and the remaining 2 Golbat were done. Aoki nodded with satisfaction. Murkrow wasn't fully back to its best, but with prankster and a well-practiced Tailwind, it was formidable. Status moves came fast, and Tailwind magnified its speed. Murkrow's green aptitude already put it above these red aptitude Golbat, and its move combinations made quick work of them. Using the same tactics, taking advantage of the leader's arrogance, Aoki and Murkrow picked off the rest of the swarm one by one until only the enraged leader remained. Golbat leader, yellow aptitude, gender, male, level 12, type poison flying, ability inner focus. Held item none, egg move, quick attack, moves, absorb, supersonic, astonish, bite, tutor move, wing attack. It was the first yellow aptitude wild Pokemon Aoki had ever seen. If he had any spare Pokeballs, he would have tried to catch it right away, either to use in battle or to trade later. It was an excellent specimen. After the continuous fighting, Murkrow's wing beats had slowed. The Tailwind's airflow around it was much weaker than at the start. Aoki frowned. Murkrow was still exhausted. He had briefly considered letting it rest, but the sun was sinking fast and could set at any moment. Golbat grew more active at night. Murkrow might not be affected by the dark, but Aoki knew his own ability to command would weaken under poor light. It was better to defeat this yellow aptitude leader and secure the stinking cave before night fell. The forest after dark was far more dangerous. The deeper they went, the more threats would be scattered in every shadow. Chapter 9. Battling the Zubat Leader. Murkrow, just a little longer. Keep Tailwind up. Aoki urged the exhausted Murkrow. Caw! Murkrow screamed with all its strength as it circled in the air. Today's battle had thrilled it, even though its body ached facing the Zubat leader, a far stronger opponent than any it had met before, filled it with a fierce joy. Aoki felt his lips lift at the sight. Murkrow's fighting spirit pleased him. Screech! The Zubat leader shrieked. It was this single Pokemon and this single human that had driven it to become the group's leader. The Zubat's higher intelligence let it sense the frailty of the slender human below. The sinking sun seemed to invigorate it. The vampire bat's energy swelled. With a sudden flap, a dark aura wrapped its blood-streaked mouth, and two fangs gleamed ominously. Dark-type move. Bite! Seeing the Zubat target Aoki, Murkrow dove forward, using Tailwind's last gust to interpose itself. The more dangerous the situation, the steadier Aoki remained. He'd stared death in the face once. That experience had given him an unnervingly calm clarity. "Murkrow, sucker punch," he shouted. Like a black bullet, Murkrow slammed into the Zubat. Bang! They flew apart from the collision, both pushed back. The two Pokémon were evenly matched. After a heartbeat, they crossed paths again. Murkrow had lost Tailwind's acceleration and couldn't fully exploit its speed, yet it still moved slightly faster than the Zubat leader. The Zubat had planned to bypass Murkrow and reach Aoki, but Murkrow kept it locked in. As night fell, however, the Zubat grew stronger, while Murkrow, worn from nonstop fighting, began to flag. After another impact, Murkrow didn't rise as quickly. The Zubat's wings trembled as it sent out ultrasonic pulses to scan the area. Sensing an opening, it swooped toward Aoki. Its fangs glowed red with the promise of fresh blood. Leech life! Caw! Murkrow braced, pressing its wings to the ground, chest heaving. It was spent. Its body felt foreign to it. The helplessness stung. A trainer's Pokémon failing to protect its trainer was the worst indignity. But Aoki, watching the Zubat lunge, smiled oddly. This was exactly what he'd been waiting for. "Murkrow, hang on one more time. Snatch!" Aoki ordered as Murkrow pushed itself up. Caw! Murkrow clenched its beak and found a second wind. When the Zubat bit into Murkrow to drain blood, it relaxed. Any blood would do. It expected the familiar warmth of the life force, but nothing came. It was like biting into the air when you want ice cream on a hot day. The Zubat froze. The anticipated recovery didn't come, and instead it felt its own energy being sapped. At the same time, Murkrow felt warmth at the wound and a current of energy pouring through it. Its exhausted body drank in that revitalization like a desert absorbing rain. The Zubat, realizing something was wrong, fluttered back weakly. Snatch, a dark-type status move, had priority thanks to Murkrow's prankster ability and had stolen the effect of leech life. "Murkrow, roost," Aoki said, seizing the moment. Roost is a flying-type recovery move. Murkrow quickly landed and rooted itself to the ground. A warm power gathered under its feet and flowed up through its body. Its stamina returned, slowly but surely. Once Murkrow soared again, Aoki added, "Tailwind again," then peck repeatedly. "Finish it." The Zubat could only watch as the black bird reappeared. Murkrow's beak glinted in the moonlight as it dove in, pecking relentlessly. New wounds opened on the Zubat's body, its vitality draining faster and faster, and it had no answer. Under the unending onslaught of peck, Murkrow summoned one last surge and finished the Zubat leader. "Caw!" Murkrow cried out, feeling its wings strengthen, its claws sharpen, its beak polish. The moonlight reflected off its smooth beak like a badge of honor. Aoki watched as Murkrow, after the long fight, leveled up from 10 to 11. One level was a small step, but its improvement was visible. After its triumphant cry, Murkrow swayed and fell, quickly caught by the quick-thinking Aoki. The roost after effect left it temporarily weak. That was why Aoki had avoided using Roost whenever possible. The move heals in the short term, but can tax a Pokemon's true energy reserves. Overuse could lead to longer-term weakness. Luckily, Aoki had breeder skills and could make suitable energy cubes, so occasional use was manageable. Still, Roost remained a last resort. Cradling the exhausted Murkrow, and with the moon high overhead, Aoki stepped into the Zubat cave. The familiar stink hit him as he pushed past mud-like droppings. He pressed on to the deepest part, following faint moonbeams. Claw marks dotted the walls. Paired with marks outside, they told a story. The original owner of this cave had been driven off or killed long ago, and the Zubat clan had claimed it. The thick layers of droppings made it clear the occupation wasn't recent. About 10 meters in, the ground dried, and moonlight streamed through ceiling cracks, making this inner chamber less dark than the tunnel before it. Aoki sat on a dry stone with Murkrow in his arms and judged they would have to rest here for the night. Murkrow slowly regained its strength, hopped out of Aoki's arms, and gently nuzzled his hand with its beak. Feeling Aoki's warmth, Murkrow relaxed. Sometimes Pokemon are that simple. With their favorite trainer by their side, through wind and rain, they stay the truest of companions and closest of friends. Aoki let Murkrow rest to the side and thought about his plans for the coming days. The basic plan stayed the same. Continue feeding Murkrow the yellow fruit energy cubes. From what he'd seen over the past few days, the cubes were working well. Just looking at the bird, Murkrow had gone from clearly malnourished to a normal-sized Murkrow in only 4 days, nearly 50 centimeters tall. But Aoki knew the changes were more than skin deep. The size increase was the most obvious thing, but the chip's daily scans showed improvements in strength and speed as well. Even Murkrow's innate aptitude had risen. It was still marked green, but the green was noticeably deeper than before, suggesting a top-tier aptitude among green-grade Pokemon. After the day's battles, Murkrow's ability to absorb the yellow fruit energy cubes had improved too. There were still 3 days left. Aoki believed that with continued use of the energy cubes, Murkrow's original aptitude would be fully restored, and then its growth would accelerate. So the training couldn't stop. It was best to seek out different opponents. Variety would both teach Murkrow battle rhythm and help it better utilize the cubes for recovery. Training would still emphasize speed. Tailwind needed consistent practice to build duration, and beyond that, Murkrow had to master a handful of essential moves and get smoother at executing the ones it already knew. As a dark flying type, it had good resistances. Nothing on the island would hit it for 4 times damage. Types that dealt double damage, electric, ice, fairy, were almost non-existent on Trial Island, so rock-type moves were the main concern. With Prankster giving Murkrow priority on some moves and Tailwind boosting its speed, Aoki wanted to hone the synergy between trainer and Pokemon and make their battle execution more reliable. Once the yellow fruit cubes were gone, Murkrow would need a different energy cube to accelerate the next phase of its growth. Aoki had already decided before the first ranking, the Dark Speed Energy Cube, a black and white intermediate cube. According to the chip, its main ingredients were dark move berries and speed berries, combined with more than a dozen other berry herbs, formulated specifically for dark and flying types, a perfect match for Murkrow. He'd spent all the points he earned in the first ranking on berries, buying mostly those two and almost clearing out the Rocket Team's stock on the island. Once he made them, Murkrow should enter a period of rapid improvement. Thinking that through put a small weight off his chest, and Aoki, tired from a long day, leaned back, hands behind his head. Moonlight seeped in through a crack in the cave, and he closed his eyes, lulled by Murkrow's steady breathing. It was summer, and sunrise came early, but he slept more soundly than he had since the restart. In his previous life, after becoming a quasi-Elite Four, he'd let his guard down and enjoyed life. In this life, it was the first honest, deep sleep since he'd begun again. The next morning, a shaft of sunlight struck his face and woke him. The forest outside the cave fell quiet as night fled. Insect chirps faded, and the tracks of nocturnal beasts disappeared. He stretched and saw Murkrow rouse, then smiled. "Murkrow, your task today is simple. Keep flapping your wings here until the smell in the cave is gone," he told it. During recent battles, aided by Tailwind, Murkrow had almost been able to use Gust. A little more training, and it might learn higher-level wind attacks like Hurricane early. Practicing would also clear the foul smell and clean the cave, 2 birds with 1 stone. Murkrow chirped and nodded, eager as always. From the moment it hatched, the crow had never known its parents or a good environment, had been bullied by other small Pokemon, and had never had proper training. Aoki was the first person who'd treated it kindly. Murkrow's loyalty mixed adoration with the dependence of a child on a parent. It lived to repay him. Seeing that bright devotion made Aoki smile as he took today's portion of yellow fruit energy cubes from storage and tossed them up one by one. Murkrow snapped them up with eager beaks. After a satisfied burp, Murkrow flew into the cave's open space and began to flap, sending gusts through the chamber. Standing behind it, Aoki felt no ill effect from the wind. After a quick wash and a simple meal of dry rations, he set up to make more energy cubes. He pulled berries and herbs from storage and arranged them on a flat stone. He wiped each berry with a clean cloth, peered at the chip for the recipe, and cleaned his primitive tools. wooden basins and pestles, a hand-cranked impurity separator, a manual compressor, and a crude coagulator. The cave was near a lake, or perhaps even an underground spring, and the water here was clearer and sweeter than what wild Pokémon drank. That helped. The tools were basic, so production was laborious and slow, and he knew these implements weren't enough for higher-grade cubes. Still, with care, the simple tools could make effective intermediate cubes. He used a small knife to peel and core each berry. Then, with the chip's calculations displayed in his hand, he cut them into uniform pieces. He trimmed herbs, crushed them, and removed impurities. He started by mashing the pulp of the dark move and speed berries together with a stirring rod, then added the other berries and herbs one by one, exactly as the chip instructed. Every ingredient required precise amounts, stirring times, and order. The chip's guidance kept the process strict. Making energy cubes demanded this precision, which was why only a few people in the Alliance could produce them efficiently. When the blend reached the right consistency, he poured it into prepped containers and compressed and solidified the paste by hand. Then he placed the molds in a cool spot to finish curing. After setting aside the first batch, he measured out the same ingredients and began the process again, steady and methodical, determined to have what Murkrow would need when the yellow fruit cubes ran out. Chapter 11. Taste. All morning, Murkrow worked on strengthening its wings, practicing wind techniques and getting a better feel for flying-type moves. It only stopped to rest when its wings ached too much to flap. It followed the training regimen Aoki had set with meticulous attention. Aoki spent the entire morning making energy cubes. This batch was far more complicated to produce than the yellow fruit energy cubes he had made before. With only simple tools, he managed to complete just over 100 by midday. He set the neat stacks of cubes into containers, let out a long breath, and stretched his legs, which had gone numb from sitting so long. When he stood, his legs complained. "Murkrow, that's enough. Take a break. It's time to prepare lunch," Aoki said. "Caw! Caw! Caw!" Murkrow flapped its wings a few more times, sending small whirlwinds across the cave that swept the remaining Golbat droppings away. Then it hopped onto Aoki's shoulder. The sudden weight made Aoki wobble. His legs were still numb, but he kept his balance. Seeing Murkrow look a little sheepish, he reached up and smoothed its newly glossy feathers. "You've grown back to full size, huh? I won't be able to carry you much longer," he joked. Humans in the Pokémon world were stronger than the people Aoki remembered from his previous life. Even with his slight frame, he could still carry Murkrow without strain. Some humans here were trained to rival ordinary Pokémon. Others had unique abilities that outclassed many Pokémon. He thought of Lorelei, the future Elite Four member who specialized in fighting types, and of Sabrina, the Saffron City gym leader whose psychic power was legendary. He'd seen Sabrina once in his previous life and still remembered her arrogance clearly. He didn't plan to reach Lorelei's level, but he was determined not to be a burden to his Pokémon. While Murkrow trained, Aoki did his own exercises. Nutrition and steady practice had filled out his once bony frame. Muscle lines were beginning to show. Living by the lake had advantages too. The undeveloped waters teemed with fat, easy-to-catch fish. After a few failed attempts, Murkrow learned how to fish properly and, with a proud caw, brought in enough for their meal. They'd stopped at the Team Rocket base once before, and Aoki had picked up a few seasonings. They grilled the fish simply, then the human and his Pokémon ate together, content. After a short rest, Aoki rubbed his hands and said, "All right, lunch break's almost over. This afternoon is battle time, Murkrow. Ready?" "Caw! Caw!" Murkrow spread its wings and nodded, eyes bright. Even after the morning's training, it felt stronger, but battling was still its favorite thing. "You're a real battle maniac," Aoki said with a smile, patting its head. The forest offered no shortage of opponents. Wild Pokémon were everywhere if you knew what signs to look for. Some would even come looking for a fight. Thanks to the chip Aoki had, he could scan an opponent's data at any time and avoid battles they couldn't win. As long as they didn't carelessly intrude on an especially powerful Pokémon's territory, they were safe. As the sun began to set, they returned to the cave, tired and satisfied. While Murkrow battled, Aoki had quietly pushed his own training too, and the results were visible. He took one of the fully solidified energy cubes from its container and examined it in his palm. The black and white cube had a delicate, jelly-like texture and a perfectly smooth surface. He sliced off a small piece with a knife and tasted it. A bitter, astringent note swelled across his tongue, earthy herbs with a dry, tart berry aftertaste. The flavor made him frown, but it wasn't unexpected. Unless you were an expert breeder, you couldn't identify all of the ingredients or the precise process behind the cube. The taste wasn't for humans, it was exactly what Pokémon liked. After a little of the cube, Aoki felt some of his fatigue ease. That was the effect on people. Energy cubes designed for Pokémon were even more potent. He fed the remainder of the sample to Murkrow, then packed the rest carefully into the storage compartment on his Team Rocket belt. Murkrow pecked happily at its portion, but then stopped and looked at Aoki sheepishly. "You glutton, slow down," Aoki chided playfully. "They're all for you, but you still have to finish the yellow fruit energy cubes for 2 more days." They had been eating the yellow fruit cubes for 5 days. The effect was fading, but still active for 2 days. Mixing different types of energy cubes before one's effect had worn off could reduce their usefulness, so Murkrow would have to wait a bit. "Caw!" Murkrow nodded, trying to conceal how much it wanted the new cubes. Aoki sat down and began to massage Murkrow's shoulders, using techniques he'd learned in his former life. After a full day of training and battles, a good massage helped recovery. Murkrow made small, contented noises, its tense muscles relaxing under Aoki's hands until it closed its eyes and sighed. After half an hour, Murkrow was fully relaxed. They prepared dinner, a large pot of fish soup, milky and rich, the tender fish meat falling apart in their bowls. They cleared up quickly, then leaned against the cave walls and fell asleep, exhausted. Outside the cave, the forest was loud with night sounds, but inside the Golbat-occupied cavern, it was peaceful and secure. Only the steady rhythm of their breathing remained as both man and Pokémon rested. Chapter 12, A Chance Encounter with a Trio. 2 days slipped by in the blur of Aomu and Murkrow's hectic routine. Those 48 hours were at once peaceful and intense, both of them living deliberately, training and recovering. The biggest change was Murkrow's appearance. After devouring a whole week's supply of yellow fruit energy blocks, the little crow had finally climbed out of the hole of exhaustion that had held it. Whether it had hit its full potential was uncertain, but Murkrow was more than satisfied. It had been smaller than the average Murkrow before. Now it measured 60 centimeters tall, 10 centimeters above the norm. Its black feathers lay tight and sleek against its body, the down glossy and smooth, sharpening the bird's streamlined shape in flight. Powerful wings flexed with new strength. With daily wing exercises, it had learned to use gust perfectly and had even felt the first brush of hurricane. Despite gaining mass, its speed hadn't fallen. If anything, it had increased. Both attack and velocity had improved. Aomu's changes were quieter but visible, a brighter spirit, muscle filling out his lean frame. He kept up with Murkrow's training regimen. Though still dressed in patched rags, his eyes had a lively gleam. Even the old Zubat cave had been tidied into something livable. Cold earth covered with soft straw and leaves, 2 crude wooden shelves lined with herbs and berries, Aomu had foraged, and a small bed with a warm animal pelt. "Murkrow, the yellow fruit blocks have done their work. The cycle's complete," Aomu said, smiling at Murkrow as it preened. "Eating more won't add much. Next, you can have the dark speed blocks you've been waiting for." At the mention of dark speed, Murkrow froze mid-preen, remembered the taste, swallowed reflexively, and stared at Aomu with hard focus. Aomu laughed and took the dark speed blocks he had been preparing from storage, arranging them in a bowl just for Murkrow. "Eat until you're full." Unlike the yellow fruit blocks, dark speed blocks were designed to subtly enhance a Pokémon with dark and flying energy. They were a mid-tier block packed with potency. The more Murkrow ate, the more it would absorb. For a bird used to pecking at fish, even a few blocks left it pleasantly sated. Murkrow savored every bite, smacking its beak in quiet satisfaction. If it weren't already full, it would have kept going. After Aomu finished his own meal, the afternoon was given to training and exploration. The Team Rocket base lay to the west, so they avoided that direction. Over the past 2 days, they had pushed east through the forest and learned of several Pokemon communities there. A Spearow flock about 8 kilometers off with a level 22 Fearow leading it, and a Pidgey community some 15 kilometers away with 2 level 21 Pidgeotto, a mated pair. The two groups hated each other and clashed frequently, and Aomu had no wish to get between them. Today's plan was to head south. Aomu set off lightly equipped, Murkrow now too large to stay perched on his shoulder. It circled ahead and hovered over his head while keeping watch. The trial island must be huge, he thought. After so many days outside the rocket base, they hadn't seen another person. Most competitors kept to themselves. For example, Gujia, who had won the first test, explored during the day but always returned to base before sunset. That changed about 3 kilometers into their southern walk. Murkrow spotted a group clustered around a tree and alerted Aomu. The two crept closer. 3 participants sat taking a break, their Pokemon lounging at their sides. The middle figure, squat and blustering, seemed to be the leader. A coughing idly drifted near him. One companion was very short and had an oddish curled at his feet. The third, plain-looking and wearing a green t-shirt, had a Zubat strapped to his shoulder. "Brother Fatty, if we just keep going straight, are we sure this is the right way?" the short boy asked. The squat leader glanced at him with thin disdain. "What, you don't trust me, Fatty?" he said, voice thick with smugness. No, Brother Fatty, of course we trust you," the green-shirted youth answered quickly, eager to mollify. "You ranked 10th in the first test. You know what you're doing." That flattery pleased the leader. He puffed up a bit. "Humph. If my coughing weren't so bad at direct attacks, I'd be ranked even higher," he grumbled, though his tone had warmed. Realizing his earlier nervousness had slipped out, the short boy hurriedly added more praise. His oddish, gentle, and low-level was hardly a fighter. It was clear he'd never trained a Pokemon before and needed someone to take him under their wing. Looking obedient and grateful, he was exactly the sort of follower Brother Fatty tolerated. Brother Fatty nodded with satisfaction. "I traded my ranking points at the base's exchange office for this map," he said, producing a folded paper. "It doesn't cover everything, but it marks nearby Pokemon communities. It even shows the Rattata colony we passed, so our direction's right." As the 10th place finisher in the first test, Brother Fatty had spent his points on a treasure map. Not everyone planned ahead like Aomu. Team Rocket stocked the exchange with maps at a range of prices and reliabilities, some genuine, some fake, and many competitors were happy to gamble on a find. Brother Fatty was exactly that sort, ready to take his chances. Chapter 13. Battle of the Trio. Today, please recommend and collect. Aomuki listened to the 3 trainers talking nearby, face impassive, eyes flickering. He knew Team Rocket carried a lot of treasure maps. Some of them even led to real loot. He hadn't traded them away yet. He planned to save them for something more useful. He hadn't expected to run into treasure hunters so quickly. He recognized the chubby boy. He used a coughing with a yellow-grade aptitude. It wasn't very high level, but the coughing's potential was good. The other 2 left less of an impression. The green-clothed boy had a Zubat that looked well-trained. The short boy had an Oddish that looked weak. Still, the trio's Pokemon were not wild. 3 trainers meant coordinated attacks. A battle was inevitable. Aomuki inched forward on his belly through the thick undergrowth. The grass hid him well, and Darkrai pressed against his back, not making a sound. He stopped once they were within 5 meters, close enough for the chip to scan, but not so close as to risk discovery. Aomuki glanced at the display. Darkray's battle data flashed up. Pokemon, Darkrai, green. Gender, male, level 12. Type, dark flying. Ability, prankster, can use status moves first. Held item, none. Egg moves, punishment, sucker punch, roost basic moves. Peck, astonish, pursuit, haze, snatch, tailwind, gust, TR moves, none. After 2 days of battling, Darkrai had leveled up and learned haze and gust. The device showed the trio's Pokemon too. A level 14 yellow-grade coughing that hadn't learned self-destruct, a level 13 orange-grade Zubat, and, surprisingly, the short boy's Oddish was yellow-grade, though only level 11. They weren't strong. Even a weak Oddish was still a Pokemon. 3 against 1 wasn't the same as 3 against 2 or 1. Oddish was doubly vulnerable to flying-type attacks, so it would be Aomuki's first target. Darkrai, activate Tailwind, then hit Oddish from range with Gust, close in, and finish it with Peck, Aoki whispered. Darkrai nodded. They'd fought together for days now. A hint was enough. Aoki raised 3 fingers and began a silent count. As his fingers curled, a faint white aura wrapped Darkrai. Its plumage sharpened and its eyes narrowed. 1, 2, 3. With a rush of wind, Darkrai's wings trembled. A gust flattened the grass and blew Aoki out into sight. He stood slowly, shaking grass from his clothes, while Darkrai surged toward Oddish. The trio stared, surprised. Darkrai's wings carved the air like knives. A powerful, focused wind blasted the dazed Oddish. Gust. The 3 trainers reacted at once, rolling away. Surprisingly, the chubby boy was the quickest. Zubat and Coughing dodged, but the twin gusts slammed into Oddish, sending it sprawling and denting the earth beneath it. Darkrai didn't hesitate. As the gusts faded, it closed and peppered Oddish with a flurry of pecks. Coughing, tackle, the fat boy barked. Zubat, bite, the green-clothed boy ordered. Aoki, now exposed, told Darkrai, dodge. Darkrai sprang aside and narrowly avoided both attacks. Oddish lay motionless, barely breathing. Oddish, the short boy wailed, tears spilling as he crouched but wouldn't come closer. He was too small to risk it. The fat boy sneered at him. Useless, he muttered. Now that they'd seen who'd ambushed them, the fat boy and the green-clothed boy recognized Aoki, the runner-up from the first test. So it's you, the lucky second-place guy, the fat boy said coldly. Aoki's lips twitched. Word of his tactics in the exam had spread. Most assumed he'd cheated or used tricks. He didn't bother to defend himself. Second place by trickery isn't anything special, the fat boy continued, eyes flashing as he signaled his companion. You hid instead of fighting, and now you ambush people? You asked for it. The green-clothed boy understood the cue. Zubat, close in and wing attack. Coughing, smog. Aoki stayed calm. Darkrai, gust, blow away the smog, he ordered. Darkrai met Zubat's approach head-on, taking hits from the gusts while closing the gap. It used Gust to disperse the smog, and then braced as Zubat swung a wing. Coughing moved in fast. Zubat's wing attack slammed into Darkrai, sending it skidding back several meters. It had taken damage, but nothing crippling. Coughing, pursuit, the fat boy cried. Because Darkrai had been hit, Pursuit's power was amplified. Right now it could pack the force of a 120 power strike. If it landed, Darkrai could be in serious trouble. Darkrai, keep your speed. Full Tailwind. Dodge, Aoki said, expression steady. Darkrai, boosted by Tailwind, blurred. It slipped past the incoming pursuit with the sort of speed that made the move miss entirely. Then, reading Zubat's next move, Darkrai struck first. Sucker Punch. Hit Zubat, Aoki ordered. Darkrai darted in and struck Zubat hard with Sucker Punch. The blow landed true, then it fell back, never lingering in range. Chapter 14. Weedle Territory. Not long after, Murkrow had dodged Ghastly's attacks long enough to strike back at Golbat. Under a flurry of swift blows, Golbat lost its ability to fight and collapsed to the ground. Aoki smiled. With Golbat down, the lumbering Ghastly was no real threat. The big man snarled, teeth bared, ready to fight Murkrow to the death, though he couldn't even graze a single feather. The green-clad youth stared at the fallen Golbat, face drained of color, indecisive. You idiots, don't just stand there. It's only one person. Go after him. Are you waiting to die? The big man bellowed, veins bulging in his neck. If even the Ghastly was rendered useless, the consequences would be obvious. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Hearing that, the green-clad youth ground his teeth, pulled a dagger from his belt, and gripped it tight. The short boy who'd been sitting on the ground snapped out of his daze and he stumbled to his feet with shaking legs and reddened eyes. The two of them surged forward together. Aoki's face stayed calm. As someone who'd been in Team Rocket in his previous life, he'd seen every kind of desperate scrap. These were just 2 young kids. Though his body felt a little thin now, he'd been trained in combat technique and didn't take them seriously. He knocked both aside casually. Murkrow, deal with the big one first, he said. Murkrow, the bird cried, wings beating. Under the big man's horrified gaze, razor claws slashed across his throat. He clutched at his neck, trying to force a sound out, but none came. He sagged and went still on the forest floor. Without anyone to command it, Ghastly became ineffective. Murkrow pressed the attack until it, too, died. In the end, all 3 humans and their 3 Pokémon lay still under the quiet canopy. Aoki ignored their desperate looks. He'd long since grown used to life and death. This was not a friendly world, but a savage one. Enemies meant potential death. Mercy to them could easily be cruelty to oneself. In this trial, only the survivors walked away. He unfastened the 3 storage belts, took what he wanted, and left the area with Murkrow. The scent of blood would soon attract larger predators from the forest. Dead bodies would be feasts. After an unknown walk, they rested beneath a tree. Aoki fed Murkrow a couple of black speed energy blocks to restore its stamina, then emptied the belts onto the ground. The heap of odds and ends offered little of value: a dagger, some food, a few survival items. To his surprise, the green-clad youth had a bottle of healing spray, probably stolen from someone else. The treasure map drew a crooked smile on Aoki's lips. Team Rocket's reward maps were notoriously amateurish. The handwriting slanted, the path crudely sketched. No wonder it was worth only 100 points. From the earlier chatter, the map's direction meant due south of the cave, and after passing 2 Pokémon groups, they should reach the spot. The big man had said they'd already gone through the Rattata group, which meant they were stepping into Weedle territory next. The treasure itself, according to the map, lay in Caterpie turf beyond that. Weedle territory was far more dangerous than Caterpie's ground. Bug-type Pokémon grow fast. In Weedle areas, Beedrill would surely appear. The danger from Beedrill wasn't just raw power but numbers and coordination. Poke at one, and the swarm would pursue relentlessly. Beedrill were aggressive and exclusive. Facing a large cluster would put even Murkrow on edge. "I hope there aren't many Beedrill," Aoki muttered. A detour might be safer, but the map only showed a straight path. Who knew what unknown hazards lay off it? Rivers, thicker forests, stronger Pokémon. Compared to the unknown, a known danger was often preferable. With the map tucked into his storage space, Aoki rose, brushed the dirt off his clothes, and had Murkrow dig a shallow pit. He buried the 3 belts and the worthless items, tamped the soil down, and they continued. They pushed into the marked Weedle territory, cutting through thorn and branch with a dagger. Both moved cautiously. Murkrow beat its wings low and quiet as they advanced. After another 7 or 8 kilometers since the earlier fight, they'd arrived in the area indicated on the map. Careful, silent progress was necessary to avoid alerting Beedrill. After another kilometer, Aoki exhaled. No Weedle, Kakuna, or Beedrill had shown themselves so far. The relief was short-lived. Up ahead, trees hung with dense clusters of golden cocoons, each roughly the size of a person's embrace. Almost every trunk bore 3 or 4 of them, and the green forest was dotted in bright yellow. He stopped and watched. No Beedrill were in sight, but that wasn't a guarantee of safety. Kakuna in their cocoon state would forcibly evolve into Beedrill if startled, and a single emergence could bring a swarm. Newly evolved Beedrill might not be strong individually, but their numbers made them dangerous even to a seasoned Murkrow. Even more cautious, Aoki and Murkrow inched forward. It took 2 hours, careful and slow, but they passed through the Weedle area without incident. Beyond this belt, though, the land was destined to become Beedrill territory. Given their nature, such a group, if undisturbed, would likely grow into one of the forest's dominant forces. Chapter 15. Pinsir, First Update. Aoki wiped the fine beads of sweat from his forehead. Even he, who had seen a lot of the world, felt a little nervous. If one of those Kakuna in the forest had suddenly evolved into a Beedrill, even if he managed to escape, he'd probably be badly wounded. Beedrill were bug poison types. Getting poisoned without an antidote could be life-threatening. When they finally emerged from the Kakuna thicket, the air felt much fresher. Murkrow, who had been held back for so long, flew full tilt into the sky, as if finally released from a cage. That stretch had truly stifled it. Even a flying type couldn't do much against a swarm of nearly 100 Beedrill. Ahead lay Caterpie territory. Judging by what they had seen in the Weedle region, this place had likely become a Metapod forest. Unlike Kakuna, Metapod were mostly docile. If left alone, they posed no real threat. Butterfree, if present, were just as passive. After checking the map again to confirm the route, Aoki finally relaxed. Murkrow circled above, not likely to land anytime soon. According to the map, they had only a few more kilometers to go. The treasure was supposed to be under a small hill. The sun slid lower, and people and trees cast long, interlaced shadows on the ground. In the quiet Metapod Grove, Aoki passed pod after pod, each waiting to evolve into Butterfree until they reached the small hill marked on the map. At the hill's top stood a massive tree that would take 3 people to embrace. The treasure was buried beneath it. But Aoki stopped short. Lying on the tree was a Pokemon with 2 large horns on its head, its body shifting as if searching for something. He made a slight hand signal. Murkrow, watching, descended at once. Taking Murkrow, Aoki approached the hill. 5 meters out, he scanned the Pokemon with his chip. Pokemon, Pinsir, Orange. Gender female, level 18 type, bug ability, Hypercutter. Held item, sticky barbag moves, Feint. Base moves, Vice Grip, Focus Energy, Bind, Seismic Toss, Harden, Payback, Vital Throw. Tutor moves, Bug Bite, none. Aoki frowned. He knew Pinsir well. His Pinsir in his previous life had green potential and the Moxie ability and had been his team's main attacker. With a base attack of 125, defense 100, and speed 85, Pinsir hit hard. If not for limited HP growth and the fact it didn't evolve, it would be even more coveted. Even now, it was a murderer for inexperienced trainers. Fast-growing bug types with such raw power and strong opening moves were dangerous. Pinsir also had a violent temper. Anything that came near would be attacked, and getting snatched by those horns made escape nearly impossible. This one was level 18 and orange potential, by far the strongest opponent Aoki and Murkrow had faced. It was clearly the local boss of the hill. If Aoki wanted the treasure, he couldn't avoid it. A fight was inevitable. Murkrow, be careful not to let it catch you with those horns, Aoki warned soberly. Fortunately, Murkrow's flying type meant Gust would be super effective against Pinsir. Murkrow clicked its beak in agreement. It had enough sense to know this opponent wasn't to be taken lightly. Murkrow, use Gust! Pinsir, happily eating, was suddenly struck by a gust of wind, the kind it hated most. Anger flared. It had long been the tyrant of this hill. Nobody had dared challenge it while it was enjoying a meal. This interference was intolerable. Kuo-yi! Pinsir roared and charged at Murkrow. As it ran, it inhaled sharply and channeled a rising airflow from its feet, the beginnings of Focus Energy. Focus Energy would raise its critical hit ratio. With Pinsir's already high attack, an increased crit chance could one-shot an opponent. Murkrow, snatch! Before Pinsir's Focus Energy could take hold, a dark aura flashed, and the effect vanished from Pinsir and reappeared around Murkrow. Using Snatch with the priority from Prankster, Murkrow stole the benefit of Focus Energy outright. The stolen energy sharpened Murkrow's stare. Pinsir's movements, its swinging arms and pounding legs, suddenly seemed slightly off balance, as if certain spots would be especially vulnerable. Murkrow, gust again! Using its new edge, Murkrow flapped hard. 2 sharper gusts of wind targeted those uncoordinated spots, striking Pinsir hard. Bang, bang! Pinsir yelped and roared in pain. Pinsir hadn't even fully understood why its usual tactic had gone wrong when a stabbing pain hit where Murkrow had struck. Furious and bloodshot-eyed, it thrashed, but being grounded and unable to match Murkrow's evasive aerial style left it helpless, like a child outmatched by a parent. Frustrated at being attacked without landing a retaliatory blow, Pinsir braced and tensed its whole body, preparing a move it usually hated, Harden, to raise its defense. Seeing Pinsir's movements, Aoki almost laughed out loud. This was the sort of difference you saw between wild Pokemon and those with trainers. Without someone calling the shots, they fought on instinct and whatever scraps of cunning they'd picked up. If you don't bully them, who will? Keep using Snatch, he ordered. Pinsir strained and charged, completely unaware its opponent had been waiting for just that. The dark aura surfaced again, and Murkrow's Snatch took effect. Pinsir, already weary from exertion, stood stunned. It hadn't used Harden often enough to expect it to be stolen. When it tried again, the stolen Harden's benefit flew off toward Murkrow in a black streak. It didn't know what that thing in the sky was, only that everything troublesome seemed to come from it. Murkrow, on the other hand, felt superb. With 2 stolen Hardens stacked, it might as well have put on armor. Its feathers stiffened until they rasped together with a metallic sound. Pinsir could only roar in frustration. After taking another gust, it finally gave up and bolted. Running was no solution. Pinsir's base speed was only 85, Murkrow's was 91, and with Tailwind speeding it up further, escape was impossible. Under a flurry of attacks, Murkrow boosted by Focus Energy, Pinsir collapsed before it made it far. Aoki didn't let Murkrow finish it off. It wasn't mercy, and it wasn't a desire to capture. It was simple pragmatism. Pinsir was perfect for leveling, and letting it live a little longer was worth more. Murkrow gained a level, hitting level 13 from that one battle, proof that beating a higher-level wild Pokémon yielded serious experience. It let out a triumphant caw, full of momentum. It had never felt so free. Attacking without fear of a counterstrike was a different kind of thrill. Aoki left the downed Pinsir behind and walked toward the large tree nearby. Up close, it was far bigger than it had looked from a distance. A dense crown of leaves formed a green canopy that shaded the ground. He felt a pleasant coolness under it and sat, picking up a dry stick to pry at the soft soil. Without tools, the stick would have to do. The earth here yielded easily. Murkrow circled and landed on one of the largest branches, bobbing and chattering at the tree as though complimenting it. Birds like trees. It was natural. Thunk. The stick struck something harder than soil. Aoki shoved the branch aside and brushed dirt off with his hand, revealing a gleaming metal box. The hole was barely 10 centimeters deep. No wonder it had been easy to dig. Whoever buried it hadn't bothered to hide it well. He pulled the box free. It was light. A small lock sealed it, and Murkrow, pecking gently at Aoki's command, snapped the lock with a single decisive peck. Inside, nested like the only treasure in a wide container, lay a single disc about the size of a palm, glowing faintly white. Aoki's face twitched. A treasure map worth only 100 points, scrawled with crude directions, buried shallowly and left almost as a prank. This was the rocket team's idea of amusement. Still, the disc mattered. It was a TM. The white glow suggested a normal-type move, but he wouldn't know for sure until he used it. Even a normal TM could be worth far more than a mere 100 points. He closed the box and slipped it into his storage. No need to decide now. He'd test Murkrow on base later. If Murkrow couldn't learn the move, he could sell the TM back to the rocket team for points. The team ran a points economy on the island. You could earn points from ranking in the trials, trading items, or completing missions, though points were hard to come by. Aoki had seen the mission board. Most tasks were basic labor, like cleaning or berry picking. He'd spent 80 points exchanging for a pile of berries earlier. Missions paid pitifully. Most cleaning jobs gave only a single point. Recycling items for points was common, but the team refunded only about 70% of an item's exchange value, so people lost value that way. Still, the rocket team stocked goods you couldn't get anywhere else, and that was tempting. Aoki suspected the fellow who'd spent 100 points on the map had been gambling on something nicer. In the end, it had turned into a lucky find for him and Murkrow. For now, Aoki sat cross-legged under the tree and thought. Murkrow had recovered over the week he'd planned, and by the look of it, the treatment had worked, though whether it was back to peak form remained to be seen. With the mission effectively complete, he had more than 2 months left on the island. Time and resources were the limiting factors. He couldn't afford to capture and care for another Pokémon when the trial allowed only one. Concentrating on Murkrow made sense. Leveling Murkrow quickly became the central goal. Recent caution had left it lower in level than many other entrants. The battle with the level 18 Pinsir proved that fighting higher-level wild Pokémon could pay off. Murkrow's dual dark flying typing had some useful matchups. Dark moves were great against Psychic and Ghost, rare here, while flying was super effective against grass, bug, and fighting types, and the island swarmed with grass and bugs. Between the Caterpie and Weedle territories he'd passed earlier, there were natural leveling grounds for a flying attacker. Even if opponents evolved into Kakuna or Metapod, or full Beedrill and Butterfree made an appearance, Murkrow could rely on Tailwind for speed and its Prankster-granted priority on status moves to pull hit-and-run tactics off with minimal risk. He let the plans sort themselves out in his mind. Train hard, pick the right hunting grounds, use Murkrow's advantages, and convert the island's abundance into steady levels. There was no need to rush into risky captures or waste resources on other Pokémon. With patience and the right strategy, 2 months here could turn Murkrow into a contender for the upcoming trials. Chapter 17, Beedrill Appears. First update, please recommend and collect. There wasn't enough time today. The sun was falling, and fighting a swarm of Beedrill at night would ruin any guerrilla tactics. Beedrill's vision wasn't great in the dark. A Murkrow might blend into the shadows, but Aoki wouldn't be able to find his bearings. The forest held too many unknowns after sundown. Any powerful Pokémon could appear out of nowhere. For now, the sensible thing was to scout the hillside's surroundings and learn what Pokémon communities were nearby. That information would be useful if they needed to escape later. Before night completely took over, Aoki led Murkrow back to the large tree on the slope. Even with their current strength, neither of them could deal comfortably with the forest's dangers at night. The area around this tree had belonged to a Heracross. Since Murkrow had driven it off earlier, the territory legitimately belonged to them now, so they didn't have to worry about being disturbed. When Aoki and Murkrow came back from scouting, the Heracross's body was gone. Whether it had retreated or been dragged away by another Pokémon, they couldn't tell. Centered on the small hillside, they were now in the domain of Caterpie and Metapod. To the north lay Kakuna territory, to the east an oddish patch with a few stronger gloom mixed in, and to the south scattered Heracross like the one Murkrow had beaten. To the west, there weren't any clear communities, just a few lone, weaker Pokémon. Ignoring other concerns for the moment, Aoki gathered dry branches and leaves and built a small fire beneath the tree. He set Murkrow's energy cubes in a wooden bowl and, under the bird's hopeful gaze, motioned for it to eat. After a day of fighting, Murkrow was clearly hungrier than usual. The more it ate, the more it could absorb from the cubes. Aoki smiled as Murkrow dug in. He took a few pieces of dried meat from his storage, quickly roasted them over the flames, boiled some water, and settled down for a simple but filling meal, enough to make up for the day's exertion. Night came, and the once quiet forest swelled with insect chirps and frog calls. Aoki and Murkrow didn't stir any trouble. The man and Pokémon climbed the tree, picked the largest branch as a bed, and fell asleep. The night passed without incident. At sunrise, Aoki and Murkrow were already up. Living in the wild had stripped away some of Aoki's old bad habits from his previous life. They ate quickly, packed up, and walked toward their objective in the fresh morning light, Kakuna territory. Passing through the Caterpie and Metapod zones was smooth. When they reached the stand of trees where Kakuna hung in clusters, Aoki stopped, speechless. The branches were utterly covered in suspended cocoons. Anyone with trypophobia might have fled. Bug-type Pokémon commonly follow the path: Weedle, Kakuna, Beedrill. Given plenty of resources, a Weedle can finish its final evolution in about 15 days. Fully evolved Beedrill are fast and hard-hitting. In numbers, they can intimidate most opponents. But in their Weedle and Kakuna stages, they're fragile. Weedle usually only know String Shot and Poison Sting, and Kakuna gain only Harden while they're immobile. According to the Team Rocket map, this area should have been Weedle territory, so this Kakuna outbreak had to be relatively recent. They wouldn't be ready to evolve into Beedrill yet. Aoki scanned the trees and read the data. Most of the Kakuna were only level 7 or 8. Their levels weren't high, but in quantity, they would still yield solid experience. This was exactly the plan. Aoki had no intention of sparing stationary Kakuna, and eliminating them now would reduce the chance that a full Beedrill swarm would form later and threaten the whole forest. Murkrow, use Gust on the Kakuna, widen the attack range, and take out as many as you can, Aoki instructed. Caw! Caw! Murkrow puffed out its chest, clearly confident. Before, passing through this forest had been risky. They were in the middle of the Kakuna, and if all of them hatched at once, they'd be trapped. Now the initiative was theirs. With their speed advantage, they could strike and run, moving from cluster to cluster and leaving whenever they wanted. Murkrow beat its wings, and two small whirlwinds formed. As the gusts spread, they grew, sweeping dozens of Kakuna from the branches. Woo, woo, the Kakuna cried, helpless as they tumbled. Those that remained shook and screamed as more companions fell. Murkrow showed no mercy. Another pair of whirlwinds, and more Kakuna were ripped loose. As a flying-type move, Gust from a skilled Murkrow was lethal to a mobile Kakuna. Their weak defenses couldn't withstand it. Under continuous Gust attacks, the Kakuna in that stand lost their vitality quickly. Aoki felt satisfied. This patch was only the beginning. Harder tasks still lay ahead. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Suddenly a faint buzzing reached Aoki's ears, growing louder. His expression tightened. Had he misjudged the timing? Had some Kakuna already completed their evolution into Beedrill? He didn't have long to worry. Moments later, 5 Beedrill with red eyes materialized before them. Seeing only 5, Aoki breathed a small sigh of relief. If there had been more, retreat might have been the wiser choice. Aoki knew Beedrill well from his past life. He'd seen them in the anime and games. They started as a common bug, often average in strength, but with the right investment, they could become fast, powerful attackers. He remembered how Giovanni's Beedrill in the manga had upended expectations, even defeating Lance's Dragonite, proof that training and resources could push Beedrill far beyond their baseline. With Mega Evolution, Beedrill had become particularly notorious. Mega Beedrill, with the adaptability ability, boasted terrifying attack power and blistering speed, turning it into a true battlefield predator. On Earth, Mega Beedrill's arrival made the species wildly popular among trainers. In this world, a Beedrill was a prize any civilian trainer would covet. Aoki took in the 5 Beedrill and adjusted his plan accordingly. This territory was only a small piece of the forest's ecosystem, and the true challenge of the trials was just beginning. Chapter 18, Giant Beedrill Swarm, Part 2. In this world, most trainers come from ordinary backgrounds. Unlike the anime, not every 10-year-old can stroll into a professor's lab and pick a high-aptitude starter Pokémon. That privilege is reserved for children of Alliance members or core contributors who pay a hefty annual fee after their child's birth. Only then will a professor hand over a starter with generally excellent aptitudes at the proper age. For commoners, starter Pokémon are a luxury. So what can someone do if they still want to become a trainer? If they have family members who are trainers, those relatives can help with catches. If not, Beedrill are a perfect choice. Weedle are easy to catch. With a little caution around their poison stings, anyone can safely obtain one. Beedrill have an extremely short growth cycle and require little time or resources to become formidable, which opens up opportunities to catch other Pokémon. Even for those with trainer families, Beedrill often make the best first Pokémon because of their rapid growth, decent potential, and strong combat ability. Elite trainers tend to overlook Beedrill. Not everyone is Giovanni, able to find an extraordinarily high-aptitude Pokémon and raise it exactly as planned with almost unlimited resources. With that kind of backing, it's better to cultivate a pseudo-legendary which becomes a top-tier combat force at maturity. Aoki had thought about raising a Beedrill in his previous life, but it never worked out. It's easy and fast to raise a Beedrill to average combat strength, but pushing one past that reveals diminishing returns. Beedrill have short lifespans. Before you can fully develop them, their strength can start to decline. Not everyone can harness something like Giovanni's influence in Viridian Forest to stall the ravages of time. Still, as a transitional Pokémon, Beedrill are useful, and since Mega Evolution hadn't been discovered yet, Beedrill still had training value as a potential Mega candidate. But those were future considerations. Right now, Aoki and Murkrow had 5 enraged Beedrill charging at them. Aoki scanned them with his chip as they approached. 5 nearly identical profiles appeared. Pokemon Beedrill, red, gender, male level 14. Type bug poison, ability swarm. Held item, none egg moves. None basic moves. Twineedle, Fury Attack, Rage Tutor moves. None. TMHM, none. All 5 scans look like clones from the same template. Aoki breathed a small sigh of relief. Only 5, and their levels and aptitudes weren't impressive. Murkrow, use Astonish, Aoki ordered. Astonish could make a Pokemon flinch, reducing how many Beedrill Murkrow would have to face directly while dealing area damage even if no one flinched. Caw! Murkrow screeched, a sharp, piercing cry aimed straight at the attackers. The sound slammed into the brains of several Beedrill. 2 froze mid-flight, bodies rigid, stingers trembling with fear. The other 3 shook off the shock and charged on, purple light gathering at their front stingers. Twineedle. Murkrow, gust the 3 in front. Take them out first, Aoki barked. Murkrow's wings vibrated and flying-type energy gathered between them. It'd grown considerably more proficient with Gust, and could now accelerate the release of flying energy. A single flap produced a white whirlwind that engulfed the 3 Beedrill. Caught at a type disadvantage, the 3 whirled in the wind. When the whirlwind died, two of them crashed to the ground, defeated, and the last staggered but barely managed to stay aloft. One move had downed two Beedrill and nearly felled a third. The two that had flinched were only just recovering. Aoki felt satisfied. Part of the result came from type advantage, but another part was Murkrow's improvement. With its green aptitude, Murkrow had better energy control and Gust had grown noticeably stronger. Peck the last one, then keep using Gust on the other two, Aoki continued. Murkrow streaked forward, a dark blur in the sky. Its beak glowed the same white energy, striking the lagging Beedrill. A light peck felt like a heavy blow. The last Beedrill plummeted, incapacitated. Without pause, Murkrow turned to the two Beedrill that had just recovered from flinching. They stood stunned and fearful. What had started as a numerical advantage now felt like an ambush. Murkrow didn't hesitate. It gathered flying energy even faster and whipped up another gusting whirlwind that howled toward them. The two reacted and tried to flee, but were caught and battered by the super-effective wind. When the gust subsided, both lay motionless on the ground. Murkrow landed before Aoki. In that small pocket of the forest, every Kakuna and Beedrill had been wiped out. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The forest filled with the buzzing of many Beedrill from farther away. They truly were swarm Pokémon. If one was threatened, the entire branch abandoned everything to rush to its aid. In terms of unity, Beedrill might be the most organized species in the Pokémon world. This time, the buzzing was denser, dozens of Beedrill. Aoki waved to Murkrow and began an immediate retreat. There was no need to face an entire swarm head-on. A wise trainer knows when to withdraw. When the swarm reached the clearing, it found a grim scene. Branches, dirt, and bushes littered with Kakuna and Beedrill corpses. Furious, the swarm began searching for the intruder who had massacred their branch. Buzz! A commanding buzz cut through the chaos. A noticeably larger Beedrill appeared in the center, its face twisted in fury. It roared orders, and the swarm fell silent, like soldiers listening to a leader. After it finished, the swarm reformed into an organized formation and vanished into the trees. If Aoki had still been there, he might have recognized it as a leader, its larger size marking its status. But he wasn't. He and Murkrow had already retreated to the Metapod territory. As they walked, Aoki pulled black speed energy cubes from his storage and fed them to Murkrow one by one to help it recover. They were still in the wild and had to remain combat-ready, so keeping Murkrow in peak condition was important. Even though Murkrow hadn't taken damage this time, it still needed stamina for whatever came next. Murkrow welcomed the cubes. Threads of energy, dark and flying, spiraled out and into its feathers. With its growing mastery of flying energy, Murkrow absorbed the cubes more efficiently. Its dark affinity meant those energy strands integrated naturally, sharpening its capabilities. The advantage of energy cubes was clear. While other Pokémon might need long recovery periods after battle, Murkrow, using intermediate cubes, recovered almost constantly and with higher efficiency. You ready? Today's task won't be easy, Aoki said softly, stroking Murkrow's now sleek black feathers. Caw, caw! Murkrow bobbed its head and flapped its wings hard, like fists clenching. Ready. Aoki smiled, tucking the final cube away. Only with Murkrow in top form could today's plan be carried out perfectly. Chapter 19. Retreat. Recommend Collection. For almost the entire afternoon, Aoki and Murkrow used hit-and-run tactics. Strike a patch of trees, rest, then strike another. They cleared 4 clusters of Kakuna that way. Each Kakuna gave Murkrow only a little experience, but the accumulation was enough for Murkrow to level up once, reaching level 14. A few Kakuna even evolved prematurely into Beedrill in fits of rage, but for Murkrow, a newly evolved Beedrill at level 13 or 14 was little different from a Kakuna. Murkrow understood Beedrill now and could defeat them with almost no wasted energy. Aoki's chip logged data on every Beedrill that appeared. Most of the dozens they faced had red potential, only a few showed orange. That made the rarity of high-potential Pokémon painfully obvious. Murkrow's green potential was practically 1 in 10,000. The difference between a red potential Beedrill and an orange potential one was stark. An orange potential Beedrill inherited one more move and had much better growth. At the same level, a red potential Beedrill would be knocked out by 1 gust from Murkrow. An orange potential one would take at least 2. It was no wonder higher potential Pokémon were prized. The distribution even suggested Team Rocket had invested heavily in this trial. Among 300 participants, the lowest potential Pokémon being orange made sense. Frequent battles and using intermediate energy blocks to recover had taken their toll. Physically, Murkrow was fine, but it was getting mentally tired. Aoki massaged Murkrow's shoulders in a practiced way, asking softly, "You okay?" Murkrow, too comfortable to reply, nodded. One more before dark, Aoki decided. After a short rest, they left the safer Kakuna fringe and pushed deeper into Beedrill territory. As they cleared 4 more patches, the outer Kakuna clusters thinned. To find more, they had to go deeper, and the deeper they went, the faster Beedrill appeared. 20 minutes in, Aoki finally spotted a tree thick with Kakuna. The sight of so many hanging there left him speechless. Beedrill reproduced fast. If they had no enemies, Aoki thought, Beedrill could easily overwhelm the whole trial island. Luckily, ecosystems favored the strong. Territories formed to avoid stronger predators. Just as Murkrow prepared another sweeping gust, several Beedrill burst from the branches. Aoki frowned. So fast. No, these must have been here to guard the place. Beedrill were social. A few waiting in ambush meant the whole swarm was taking them seriously. Then, like a hornet's nest, more Beedrill poured out. Their buzzing rose and fell like an angry roar. They glared at Aoki and Murkrow. After today, nearly 100 of their kin and countless Kakuna had been wiped out. The slaughter had ignited their fury. Aoki's face grew serious. There was a clear leader coordinating the swarm, an alpha like in a wolf pack. A few individuals weren't frightening, but a pack with a leader was united and deadly. The Beedrill began to encircle them. If they were fully surrounded, they'd be in danger. Aoki kept calm and looked for an escape route. The chip analyzed the surroundings as he moved. Murkrow cawed angrily at the Beedrill. It could probably handle even twice as many on its own, but Aoki would be at risk. The crow Pokémon tried to intimidate, then began to back away with Aoki. A deep buzzing sounded from within the swarm, and the Beedrill suddenly went berserk. Their red eyes flashed, and the sound of beating wings swelled like a tide. Murkrow, gust forward to hold them off. Peck the few behind us. Retreat, now, Aoki ordered. The encirclement hadn't fully closed. Most of the swarm was before them, with only a few stragglers behind. If Murkrow could blunt the front with gust and clear the rear, they might still escape. Murkrow summoned as much flying energy as it could and created 2 massive white whirlwinds between them and the Beedrill, blocking the swarm. A few trying to break through were swept up and incapacitated. Aoki didn't look back. He pulled a yellowish-brown cloth from his pouch and tied it around his head, covering his neck and lower face and leaving only his eyes exposed. Then he dashed for the thick bushes. 2 Beedrill charged straight at him. Aoki ignored them, trusting Murkrow to handle them. Bang! Bang! Murkrow didn't disappoint. With sharp peck attacks, it knocked both charging Beedrill out cold. Perched above Aoki and ready to escort him, Murkrow glared at the whirlwind barrier. And then something huge crashed through it. A massive, enraged figure tore through the gust as if it did not exist, a sharp stinger rending the wind. Aoki glanced back, and his pupils constricted. A giant Beedrill, twice the size of a normal one, hovered where the whirlwind had been. It was the leader of the swarm, clearly a potential leader Pokémon. The chip, too far away to scan, gave no data, but its aura felt at least as strong as the pincer they had defeated earlier, perhaps stronger. Now was not the time to stop. Aoki ran faster. Murkrow used Gust repeatedly to hold the Beedrill at bay while they slipped away. After half an hour of dodging and sprinting, they finally lost the swarm and climbed into a deep Kakuna grove. Perched on a branch, Aoki gasped for breath and at last could relax. The supplements he'd been taking and the breathing techniques from his past life's training had let him endure the long escape. As his breathing steadied, Aoki thought about the number of Beedrill they'd seen. He had assumed the swarm was unorganized, numerous but immature and vulnerable to flying moves, and that he could grind the area into a reliable leveling ground if he controlled the pace. He hadn't expected a leader to emerge so quickly, one with the intelligence to coordinate ambushes. Leadership made all the difference. A scattered group could be crushed, but a led, united swarm was like a clenched fist. He had only caught a fleeting look at the leader, and hadn't been able to scan it. To rise so quickly and command the hive, its potential and strength could not be weak. Reluctant though he was to give up such a rich hunting ground, retreat had been the only sensible choice. Chapter 20. The Pokémon Egg. This was the real challenge. If every opponent was helpless, Murkrow would get bored. Aomori knew that. Murkrow had never taken pleasure in mowing down the Beedrill swarm. It was only following his orders. He had noticed that, but there was nothing he could do about it. Only when the Beedrill leader showed up did true excitement spark in the black bird. Aomori stroked Murkrow's smooth feathers and shook his head with a helpless smile. "You're a battle maniac, getting this fired up over a worthy opponent." "Caw! Caw!" Murkrow replied. For a proud fighter, winning by one's own beak was the highest respect. It fluttered up and down, thrilled. Aomori rubbed his aching head. The current Beedrill swarm was coiled like a hedgehog, hard to approach. He set that problem aside for now. The sun hung low in the trees, night was coming, and any meaningful attack would have to wait until morning. They climbed down to their familiar hillside, lit a bonfire, and as always, Aomori gave Murkrow a full-body massage. "Murkrow, if we're going to take on that leader, we still need more strength. It'll be a tough fight," Aomori said, turning a stick and roasting dried meat. "Caw!" Murkrow nodded solemnly. It would endure hardship if it meant getting stronger. "Then let's start now. Post-dinner workout." Aomori found 2 pieces of wood, each about 5 pounds, and tied them to Murkrow's wings with pre-prepared ropes from his storage space. With the extra weight, flapping felt heavy. What had once been effortless flight was suddenly unfamiliar. At first, Murkrow wobbled as it left the ground. Then, after a while, it adapted. Every beat of its wings demanded more effort. Seeing Murkrow grow used to the burden, Aomori nodded. "Now, fly 100 laps around this tree." The tree was so large, 3 people would be needed to hug it. Its branches spread wide. 1 lap was about 20 meters. Without hesitation, Murkrow began, circling the trunk again and again. Night fell. After training, Aomori and Murkrow slept. 4 days had passed since the last trial. Today was the 5th. In 2 days, there would be another trial, so whether or not they could deal with the Beedrill now, they had to return in a day. Aomori lay hidden in a thicket, flat to the ground beneath leaves and grass. His head was wrapped in a rag bandana, his face streaked with grease paint. Only his eyes peered out. He smelled faintly of tree sap. From a distance, no one would notice a human here. Yellow, red-eyed Beedrill flew over the brush one by one, detecting nothing, until the last one whistled past. A black bird settled nearby and gave a soft call. Caw! It was Murkrow, back from leading the swarm on a chase. Following Aomori's plan, Murkrow had flown at a pace that let the Beedrill keep up but not catch it, then used Tailwind and a burst of speed to shake them off before returning. Only now did Aomori stand, brush dirt from his clothes, and stomp his numb limbs. He wasn't used to long periods of hiding. He fed Murkrow a black speed energy cube from his storage to replenish it, and smiled. With the entire swarm drawn away, he could finally explore the heart of their territory. They pushed into a part of the forest clearly untouched by humans, or other Pokémon. Weeds and underbrush crowded every step. There were no clear trails. Leaves chewed and silk wrapped around branches told of former Weedle activity. The air smelled of fresh growth. Aomori and Murkrow pressed on toward the center. About 10 minutes later, they arrived. At the heart stood an ancient, massive tree, nearly 3 times the size of the one Aomori lived in. Embedded in its trunk was a mud-made structure that looked like a nest. Perching on the edge, aided by Murkrow, Aomori stared in disbelief. Inside the enormous hive were Pokémon eggs, countless eggs, almost all Beedrill eggs. If they all hatched, swarms of Weedle would flood the area and evolve into Beedrill. Bug types lived fast, but they bred faster than most other species could imagine. Aomori activated the chip and scanned the eggs. Lines of data flickered before him. Most were low, red tier, though a smattering of orange tier eggs showed up, and here and there higher quality ones. When the scan finished, he froze. Over 500 Beedrill eggs. Only 25 were orange tier, and just 3 had reached the yellow tier. He took a deep breath. A headache pressed at his temples. What was he supposed to do with this many eggs? Destroying them would mean nothing. He was ruthless toward enemies, not toward potential life. Murkrow nudged his leg and looked up, wing pointing toward higher branches. Aomori glanced up to see a smaller, more carefully built hive higher in the tree, the leader's nest. He had Murkrow fly him up to the edge. 3 eggs rested inside. A scan of these 3 left him stunned. 2 were yellow tier, and the third one of them was green tier. Weedle egg, potential, green gender, female, level 1, type, bug poison, ability, unknown, held item, none egg moves, bug bite, focus energy, note, no learned moves, no THMs, Aomori swallowed. This was his first time seeing an unhatched green tier Pokemon. It was just a common Weedle, but green tier potential removed many of the species' usual limits. This egg was clearly the child of the Beedrill leader. Judging by the brood's potentials, the leader itself must be at least yellow tier, possibly even green. In inheritance, Pokemon potential tends to fall within one tier of their parents. Offspring of yellow tier parents will usually be orange or yellow, and sometimes green if exceptional. That meant the parents of this green tier egg were likely yellow or green themselves. He wrapped the green tier Weedle egg in a scrap of cloth and tied it securely to his back, then jumped gently to make sure it wouldn't fall. Pokemon eggs couldn't be put into storage space. Living things lose vitality there and die, so he wouldn't risk it. Whether he kept the egg for himself later or sold it to Team Rocket or someone else, it had worth. Aomori had been a Pokemon hunter in his former life. He knew how to handle opportunities like this.